Page 24, If I Were a Rich Man. This piece goes 24, 25, and pages 26 and 27. I'd like to talk about a few things in it. I'm going to start out with the right hand. On page 24, in the first line in the last measure, when the right hand comes in, notice there's one staccato note, and that is an important staccato. So as you're playing it, make sure it's a staccato. Now, if you can, do it without accenting it. The tendency when you do this is to accidentally accent the note. Just play it normal and just make sure it's short. On line 2 on page 24, they're suggesting you start with the thumb, but when you get to the second measure, look at that, it's 1, 2, 1. You want to do that, that's fine, but I think a much better and easier fingering is on the first measure, start with the second finger here, and then on the second measure, it's 2, 3, 1. On page 24 in the last line, first measure, the first chord's not a problem. The second chord, be careful. That is an F sharp G. Sounds terrible. That's what it is. And it's accented, so give it a little extra oomph. The fingering I've explained so far happened over and over, so you can just do it each time it happens if you want to use that fingering. Over on page 25, third line down, third measure. See all those G's? Yeah. I would recommend for the eighth notes, you do a 3, 1, 3, 1, 3, 1. Just alternate them. So you start with a 2. You can do a 1, 3 instead. It doesn't matter which finger comes first. Some people will use the thumb on the beat and the other finger on the half beat. Because these are eighth notes, it's 2 and 3 and. For the and note, they would use the middle finger and the thumb for the others. I try not to favor one over the other. You can decide which you like. Try them both out. So you can, on the eighth notes, you could do a 1, 3, 1, 3 or a 3, 1, 3, 1. You decide. On the fourth line on page 25, first measure, I recommend those 4 F's do a 1, 2, 1, 2. The tricky passage in this piece, bottom of page 25, next to the last measure, going into the last measure. That pattern, watch very carefully. Now this kind of pattern is quite common actually in piano, and I recommend you get a grasp of what's going on here. We're simply doing a chord, one note at a time, and working our way up the keyboard a little bit. So after the initial note there, the E, third finger, once you play the first eighth note with the second finger, you're in this position for that chord. Those are the notes we're using. So that's what we're going to use. So it's on the C, it's a 2, 1, 4, not 3, 4, 2, 5, okay? Got it? Then for the last one, it's the thumb again, because now we got to move our hand position, and this is how we're going to do it. We're here, we scrunch the hand out, put the thumb on it, and then you're ready for the first note in the last measure. They're saying 3 and 4 on it, I say 4 and 5. This is a chord. That's the fingering for the chord. I recommend you use that fingering. So 4 and 5. So there. Now, once you get the hang of it, it's really not that bad, but I would encourage you to get in the habit of using the fingering for the chords on these. If you do the arpeggio video on the triads for C major, because I do those. All these different things that you got, you're basically using these finger patterns in the pieces, and they're important. Page 26, second line, last measure. That G, the first note, you would be playing with your little finger. And that's because the measure before it, you're in that position. Then they want you to lift your hand and move it and put your third finger on the B. It's okay if you want to do that. It's between phrases, you can get away with it. However, I think you could also, on the next to the last measure, here, you put your second finger on the last note, that E flat, and the third finger on the G, and then you could use 5-4, 5-4-1. They want you to use 3-2-1. You got to be able to do either one. So that's what I would recommend. Because the hand reaches here. You're not making this jump from here to here. It's doable. You can practice that and do that if you want. On page 26, fourth line down, last measure. Fingering is 1-3, 1-3. I recommend a 2-3, the 2 on the C sharp, and then a 1-3. You can do a thumb on everything if you want, but I prefer a index on the black note. That could be a bit of a stretch for you, and if it is, you're pretty much going to have to use the thumb. The pattern at the bottom of page 26, second measure, we already talked about that. I recommend the fingering that I gave earlier. What they want you to do is keep moving your thumb up, and that's tricky. There's all kinds of things can go wrong with that. I do not recommend that at all. No, 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 no. Use the pattern I gave you for that. That's much more solid. It's much safer once you learn it. On page 27, this is the fourth line down, last measure. We have that nasty little thing going on again. So rather than do it third fingering, I prefer a 3-2-1, 2-3, and then you're closer to where you want to be. They want you to go fifth finger here to here. I'm suggesting you go third finger to here. To me, that's easier. You decide for yourself. On the last line on page 27, starting in the second measure, all those eighth notes, we've had this pattern before where they tell you to do this. Start with a thumb. Right? It's doable, but I still prefer starting with the second finger. And up there. Last measure, right hand, you have a B flat. And then on the chord, it's a B natural. Up here, you got to go up here. And then the final chord. In the left hand, you have throughout a lot of this a pattern like at the beginning on page 24. This. They want the 2/8 notes staccato. Well, the tendency if you do that is you're going to make the quarter notes staccato too. I mean, that's just a natural thing it wants to do. That's not what's written. Only make the eighth notes staccato. And you have to continue this pattern even though the right hand is doing other stuff. And that's tricky, it really is. Right there in the last measure of the first line, when the right hand plays a staccato, my tendency is I want the left hand to play a staccato too, but that's not what's written. No. So you have to be careful. Work out the left hand carefully and go slow to make sure that the eighth notes are staccato, and that's it. See, they don't mark all the eighth notes staccato because on the first line on page 24 they have that simile, means keep doing it the way you were doing it. So the first two measures tell you how you're going to do it throughout for this pattern. When you have eighth note, or when you have a quarter note, 2 eighth notes, and then 2 quarter notes. Yeah. Bottom of page 24, first measure. On beat 1, you got the GF, and then the G by itself with an 8V8 under it. So you go down an octave from here to here. For that, and it's accented. Boom. It fits what the right hand's doing. Wakes them up. At the bottom of page 25, last two measures. That's a chord. It's the same chord the right hand is doing, except the right hand has to do eighth notes. The left hand doesn't. I recommend on the E, fourth finger, not third. Okay? If you stick to the chord fingerings on these, that makes it so much easier when you get these kinds of things in these pieces. It really does, especially for sight reading. You get that again on the bottom of page 26 in the same, you get the same pattern again. It's still fourth finger. Oh, I will warn you at bottom of page 27, last measure, you have the first G with the thumb. They're telling you the second G is with the thumb. That's good. Do that because that puts you in position to play the C. If your hand's big enough, you could play that G with the second finger. The idea is put you in position to play the C, so it doesn't have to be the thumb. The second finger would do it. That's fine too. It's up to you. In the coda, take a look at this is the coda on page 27. Your first measure is here in the left hand. Your next measure is the C and the G. I recommend a 3-1 on that. Okay, you're going to get this same GF to CG over the next few measures, and I recommend here to 3-1. Again here, 3-1. Here, 3-1. It's much easier than moving the hand. On the fourth line down, second measure, left hand, your dates, they're recommending 4-1. I recommend a 3-1. Remember, it's the same 3-1 there, and then you can go here. They're fine there if you want. And then here. Roadmap for this thing is you play 24 and 25, 26, and the first two lines of 27. Then you have a DSL sign, then coda. So at that point, you're going to go back to the sign, which is at the top of page 24. There, the last measure at the beginning, it's got that little squiggly thingamajigger. That's the sign. You go back to there, and you play up to the top of page 25, last measure. You see at the beginning of the last measure, it has a circle of crosshairs. That's the indication to go to the coda. So at that point, you jump over to the coda. The coda is the third line down on page 27. It's got the same circle with the crosshairs. It's labeled coda. It doesn't have to be labeled coda. The sign is all it needs. And then you finish it up. When we play this together, we're not going to do that. It's just going to go straight through it one time. It's going to sound a little weird. I'm not trying to perform it. I don't want to have to be changing pages back and forth. Now the pedal. As far as I'm concerned, you leave the pedal out. But they put it in, and I'd like to explain why in a few places. At the bottom of page 24, you get the pedal on that accented beat. Where before we said this, okay, you have the pedal there with it. The reason they want the pedal on this is because it tends to actually make it sound fuller and in effect louder, with all the overtones going also all throughout everything. When you hit an accented note like that with the pedal, it's different than without the pedal. And you can experiment on your own piano, the difference without and with. In this technique, I recommend you put the pedal down with the note, not after, with it, or slightly before. It's actually more effective if you can get it down a little bit before. Since there's a rest in the beat before, just put the pedal down just an instant before you play the notes. That releases the dampers so that when you do play the notes, those overtones go crazy right from the beginning. There's no delay, and that makes it a little more effective on this kind of thing. It's a different pedal technique, but it is used quite a bit. Then on page 25, at the end of the second line, we're legato pedaling those three quarter notes. Each one has a fermata. I'm going to hold them for 2 counts each. And this is a delayed pedal. This is so you're going to play the first one and then hit the pedal. Next one, then change pedal. And then the next one and change pedal. And then keep the pedal down until right after you play the first beat of the next line. Because you want to connect them, all right? And you have to change hand positions. So you're going to have the pedal help you out here. And it's going to keep the sound going so you can get your hands in the position and keep it all connected. All right, so we want to go, that last beat is here. And the next one, you got to move both hands up. And since the pedal's down and it's a fermata, you can go ahead and look down and get your hand in position and get ready to go and then take off. Works really well. The idea of having the pedal down on those notes, it makes them sound fuller if you got a bunch more overtones going. So if I do this without the pedal, or this with the pedal, at least on an acoustic piano, there's a considerable difference in the sound. Right? I don't know if the electronics is picking it up. Then at the bottom of the page, see the pedal marking there at the last two measures? I'm fine on this sort of thing without pedaling it at all. But they want this buildup of sound all the way through. So it's going to be here. So it builds up. I guess they want it. I don't know that it's really necessary, but they want it. Okay, that's fine. Push the pedal down right after you push the notes down in the second beat. The C's, then the pedal goes down. And then lift it up right before you play the E. So don't connect this and the E. So it's this way, so there's a little break in the sound. See? Careful not to make the first beat of the last measure staccato. Okay, it's a tendency. When you want to break, you're going to, I'll give you a break, and you'll make it real short. Don't make it real short, it's not staccato. We just need a real fine little break here. Same thing happens at the bottom of page 26, but I just do it the same way. The pedaling on 26 and 27 is basically the same as what we've already discussed. On page 27, the end of the second line, the half notes, push the pedal down right after them. We're going to hold that for 4 counts, and then we lift up. And I just will talk about that. Those two little lines there, the end of the second line on page 27. That's called a susura, or a break. We're going to pause. We're going to stop. It's going to be total silence. And I'm only going to, since I'm doing it with a metronome, I'm only going to do it for 1 beat. If you're doing it for real, you feel it. You might have you might do it for 1.5 beats. It's a pause. And then, well, in this case, you'd go back to the beginning, or toward the beginning, or near the beginning, and start playing again. Today, in the video, I'm going to go on to the coda. So we're going to play the half note for 4 counts with the pedal. Then the pedal and the hands come up at the same time, 1 beat, just 1 beat, and then go ahead and go on to the coda. But those two little marked a susura, or a pause, that interrupts the beat. This is one of the few things in music that can actually interrupt the beat. The flow of the beat, that does it right there. We have to make it sort of work with a metronome, but normally it would pause and it would stop for a moment, and then it's for effect. You hear it all the time. It's used in a lot of music. In the coda, in the second line, first 2 measures, you see both hands 8 VA. So instead of here, you're going to go up to here for 2 measures. And then they come back down. There is a pause on the 3rd line down on page 26. First measure. So the first beat here. Then we stop when we pause, and then we continue on. I'm only going to pause for 1 beat. Okay, so it's going to be 1, 2, 1, 2. And then we continue. continue. And while we're on pauses, I just will tell you it's on page 25 in the second line too. It's the same thing. We're just going to stop for one count and then we'll continue on. If you're doing it for real, you can do it longer than one count. Don't do it for too long, but you can do it a little longer. You get in the mood of the music and you'll feel that pause and then you'll keep going. Let's try this out and see what happens slowly. We're just going to do it slowly. We just want to check the notes and the rhythms and all that junk. So we're going to do pages 24 and 25, then we're going to stop. We're going to turn the page. Then we're going to play pages 26 and 27, just one time straight through. That's it. If you're going to try and play this for somebody, you want to play it for real, you got to make that page turn without messing up the beat. Well, here again, you have that chance because at the bottom of page 25 in the last measure, the left hand has rests. So while the right hand is playing those 3 beats, you can very quickly reach up with the left hand and turn the page. All right? You practice that. We practice page turns in piano. So yeah, you would do it. I would show you, but I have the music set long way away. I can't really reach it. I could always do a video on page turns if needed. I don't know. Left hand is starting off in C position, and the right hand is 4th finger on that. So you're here, actually, because you want a thumb on C to start with. It'll move around a bit. That's to start with. And the foot's on the pedal. All right? Right. I'll give you 4 counts, and we try it. 1, 2, ready, and go. And... rest, rest. Pause, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And stop. Turn the page. Hands in this position. Okay. Foot's on the pedal. Here we go. 1, 2, ready, go. Pause. rest. 2, 3, 4, pause. 4, 4, 4, rest. Rest.